Hello, hello, hello. I am Grum, coach and general manager of your Philadelphia T-Tars, but that's not who I am today. I still am Grum, however, I am the analyst for the BBR-D League Season 3. I'm serving as an analyst for the BBR-D League Season 3 this season, mainly because I needed to take a step back from actually battling and prepping and all that fun stuff. But I still needed that. I still needed it, right? I still wanted the rush of it all. So instead of prepping for one game, I'm just going to be looking at the weekly 9 games for the BBR-D League, because there's 18 coaches this season. We're going to get into them. And when we do the watch-alongs for week 1 later this weekend, I will have the preseason general manager survey that the general managers were gracious enough to fill out, and we'll go over the results of that. But we're here to preview the 9 games for this week. The objective mainly is to just keep making some content week to week as I take a break from the competitive, but also flex my brain a little bit about matchups and see if I can come up with some sets and whatnot, or just general look at matchups and be like, hey, this is what I would do, and see if I get it right. Each week I will be going over the matchups as well as the previous week's results, but because this is the first week, there's no previous results. But go out, check out all the draft analysis from the general managers that they put out. I will have a link to a playlist that I'm going to be keeping track of for my own watch-alongs, but you can as well. All the draft league stuff for the BBR-D League Season 3 will be there, including these videos at the top of every playlist. I do appreciate, and I'm sure the other general managers appreciate it as well. But let's get into these matchups. Why don't we? We're going to start things off with the Steamy Sunfist, coached by HunkyDonkey, taking on the Drunken Fist Decidueye, coached by Professor Pokemon. We're going to start things off with the Steamy Sunfist and HunkyDonkey. Offensively, I really like Iron Treads this week. Only 3 ground resists in the form of Tornadus, T, Rabombi, and Serena. And Tornadus is a TERA captain. It could lose its flying type, and that could still be a problem. Walking Wake with Sun support this week also could be huge. I could see TERA Water to give a Hydro Steam even more power, especially outside of the sun, and basically would give it its same raw damage if it was in the sun, but in the sun, even more power. But if I was Hunky, I'd be TERA Flying, as it gives it a stab super effective move against both Urshifu and Serena, 2 of its potential checks. Defensively, I think the team struggles against Petrin a little bit, but Braviary is a pretty solid check, as it is a normal type, so it's immune to Ghost type, but more importantly, it has the Define ability, which means Parting Shot gives it a super duper boost to its attack. Rotom Wash has to come, I think, this week, because it's really the only thing that is stopping Tornadus T from going wild, and that's like if. Walking Wake is the key Pokemon, though, I think, in my opinion. It is a breaker through and through this week. Especially as a TERA captain, it can either become more powerful with either of its stab or add a 3rd stab, like I mentioned. All that just to open up for Treads to come in cleaning up. I don't think Professor Pokemon would appreciate a late game Meowscarada either, but I don't think that is as likely, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, hey, like Meowscarada. But I think Walking Wake is the biggest key to success for Hunky in this season opener. Taking a look at the Decidueyes, let's take a look at Tornadus T. You're telling me this Pokemon, which is already one of a top-tier Pokemon in the Gen 9 Draft League format, and it now can stab TERA? It could double stab. It's messing with my brain. It can TERA, meaning it can have a double flying type stab. That means stab. Bleak Windstorm is even more powerful. Air Slash, Hurricane. But more importantly, it would give it a consistent flying type move with a flying TERA Blast. Or maybe it goes TERA Grass so it can hit Rotom super effectively and then take care of everything else with Air Slashes or whatever. It's powerful Pokemon, and the fact it can TERA is wild. Petrin, I already a little bit went over it, but its offensive profile looks very well this matchup. Aside from Braviary, it really only worried about Swalot, which is kind of a little passive in this matchup. Yuxi, just sheer bulk-wise, can take maybe a Malignant Chain or whatnot, but really, its Braviary is the best check, I think, and that is a problem for HunkyDonkey. Defensively for the Professor Pokemon, on the other hand, though, Ting-Lu is a big-time player. There's a reason why I call him Ting Duncan. This is just a winning Pokemon. That's all this Pokemon does, is just win, especially, at least in Draft League. Despite, though, its typing saying, like, oh, crap, against Walking Wake, Meowscarada, and even Slitherwing, I think Ting-Lu's bulk, and more importantly, Hazard's supports, very, very important this week. And on the other side of the Hazard conversation, Kamala and Serena can take care of some hazards as well, but I think their bigger values come in the form of checking Walking Wake. Their special bulks are pretty deceiving, but I don't think they can really do it for too long, right? So it's a matter of, do you have the ability to take advantage of Walking Wake switching out, which both have U-turn, so that's good. I think the winning Pokemon for the Decidueye, though, is the Tornadus T. There's no other option, right? I mean, there's plenty of options, but Tornadus T as a Terra Captain is disgusting. And in this matchup against a very flying weak team, the only resist being the being Iron Treads and the Rotom Wash. But again, Heat Wave on Tornadus covers the Iron Treads, and Rotom can get got by a Terra, so it's not exactly great. Let me make my prediction, though. First prediction of the season. I love my guy Hunky, but this is a rough matchup to open his season with, and I'm excited to see what he can cook up to deal with the Tornadus T, but I just think that Tornadus T is too good in this matchup. Overall, it's very good. I think it is a contender, as do some of the general managers, a contender for the season knockout leader, but I do think that Professor Pokemon and the Drunken Fist Decidueyes take a victory to open the season. Game 2, we got Oslo City Dragon Dancers taking on the Chicago Grookey's. We got Soulblaze, we got Vortex. Starting with Oslo here, love the Landorus in this matchup. Having to rely on Stone Edge is not exactly great, but I mean, if you're really looking at this, it's able to outspeed a lot of things against this team. So I could even see like a Sandstorm Weather Ball, like just to cover the ground immune Pokemon with Earth Power, and you have your Sand Force, so you don't even, or you can run Life Orb, Sheer Force, and still basically do the same amount of damage. But either way, I like Landorus here. But really, Terra Raging Bolt is very good here as well. But I think Landorus is a smidge better, but really good Terra Raging Bolt. Its speed is obviously holding it back. It's slow compared to other Terra Captains around the league. But I think despite it being the speed is going to cause it to have to get going a little bit, a defensive Terra typing like a water or a flying would allow it to have that time to get going and be an offensive threat in this matchup. Defensively, Oslo's special defense, very bad. I don't even want to be like, oh, like Colossal's 90 base speed special defense is the highest on the team. That is a Pokemon that does not like water, that is quad weak to water, quad weak to ground, neutral to grass, and it does resist Fairy, which is like a common special type. But I mean, yeah, you can put an AV on the team and be all right, but sometimes you want to get up hazards with some of these Pokemon. So I just don't think this is a really good matchup because Chicago has Pokemon like Goldengo and Primarina on the other side. Klefki is going to be a huge bring getting a screen up. I do worry just in general because about the special defense causing some of these physical like walls like the Colossal and Fortress requiring to invest into special defense to be bulkier on that side of things. I think the straightest path forward, though, is just go right through the wall. Break the wall with as many trucks. Just go hyper offense. You have a Landorus, you have Terra, Raging Bolt, you have some other very strong Pokemon to break through. That is probably the thing, but it needs Klefki to get those things going, to at least let the Pokemon not be a constant revenge mode, you know? They can start getting some momentum. On the other end, for Chicago, though, Goldengo looks very strong. We talked about it because of the poor matchup, but Low Kicks and Cincina are the only ghost resist on that team. So a Scarf or a bulky attacking set, Goldengo is very good. I dare say it's golden. Okay, enough about that. Enough puns. I'm not going to do too many of them, but I mentioned the whole like physical walls being specially built and thus the physical attackers getting to take advantage of that. Lycanroc and Gyarados like that. But I think Gliscor will love that even more because its stabs look really good, and it's a Terra Captain, so it can Terra into a flying type to get a double stab on a Terra Blast. It can run a weakness policy set, so its acrobatics are good, and you can run a water type for a defensive, typing to keep staying alive. Or you just run it to be a defensive Pokemon. But I think Rotom Heat I think that's Pokemon number 1 on the defensive, like scout things that you're looking at. It's like, I have Rotom Heat, I gotta bring it. It is solid in this matchup as a Levitator, so it deals with the Landorus pretty well. Also, it can do a decent job against the Raging Bolt. It can get some statuses with Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave. It can even set up screens if that is what Vortex decides to do. But I think Rotom is definitely the #1 defensive option. I think I have a take here, though, is that Shaman is a top 3 grass type this generation in this format, in Draft League format. I don't think, I mean, obviously other ones can TERA. The Ogerpons are great. Zarude's good. Rillaboom is good. I just think Shaman is so versatile and so consistent. I think it puts it over some of those Pokemon. And in this matchup, it can soak up a lot of hits. Obviously, Raging Bolt can go like TERA Ice or TERA Flying and then beat it, but I do like Shaman defensively in this matchup. I think Gliscor is really solid in this matchup, and I think you could get your opponent by surprise with a little bit more of an offensive set, right? Even you can go TERA Ice and you can hit the other Landorus for super effective damage. I think Gliscor, though, is pretty strong here, even though I talked about Goldengo and Primarina being good. I think, though, this is a tough one. I think while Oslo's like win condition is basically just go hit hard and win 1-0, I don't think that is going to be able to be done against this Chicago team. I think Chicago is going to take the win here, but I will not be surprised if Oslo swings this entirely in their favor with some key kills early on. But I'm going to make my official prediction being Chicago taking the win. Game 3, we got the Seattle Sigalifs taking on the Phoenix Incineroars. Coaches DashingSceptile and CJ Jensen on the other side taking on each other. Let's start with the Seattle Sigalifs. Dashing sacrificed a lot of speed and bulk for arguably the most offensive team in the league. There's physical, special, doesn't matter, and no one exemplifies that more than Infernape, who is fast, but it looks insane. Out of all the threats on this team, it looks the same as a firefighting type, mixed attacker, special attacker, physical attacker, doesn't matter, it looks great. I love Ursaluna Blood Moon as well. Thanks to its Mind Eye ability, it's able to hit everything for at least neutral damage. That is very, very, very valuable, right? There's nothing that can really, something can come in and resist, maybe a Blood Moon, but you're not going to be able to resist an Earth Power, right? And this is a bulky Pokemon that you might not be able to take down in one hit. So that's a problem. Defensively, Seattle does have a defensive balanced team, even if it's not too many quintessential defensive Pokemon, right? It does have, Dashing did draft Galarian Weezing, who is I think is going to be needed as a physical check for Weavile and Zarude, especially before it TERAs as a resisting the dark type. Those two Pokemon can be problems, but I think Necrozma can be like an offensive TERA captain. I think Dashing has one of the more interesting TERA captains. Necrozma is a very bulky Pokemon who's a psychic type. That means it doesn't obviously knockoffs and U-turns, two of the common moves, spammable moves for teams. Not great, but you can turn this thing to a water type, or a steel type, or turn it into a fairy type. And with its Prism Arbor ability, it's just going to stay up, tank hits, and keep going and chipping away. And I think that'll be a big thing for that. The winning Pokemon, though, it's got to be that Infernape. I don't know how it gets it in position. I think Thundurus can really help break some things, but I think the Infernape is really strong here. Roaring Moon could, but you got to match up against Blastoise, who's a bulky Pokemon, and the intimidating Hitmontop. Not fantastic. Infernape is the key Pokemon there. Let's take a look at the Phoenix Incineroars. Offensively, this is one of the few teams that matches Seattle's offensive output, at least on the physical side. CJ can really rely on Weavile this week, as it is the fastest Pokemon in the game, and its coverage between Ice and Dark is very strong. And Namorous also looks pretty good here. It does have the highest special attack on the team, and it does match, it's going up against not as bad as Oslo City. But Seattle doesn't exactly have the highest special bulk either. And that bodes well for Namorous. Defensively, I talked about Necrozma being a good defensive TERA captain. I think Zarude is one of those Pokemon that you don't think about. A, because it's a mythical from Gen 8. B, it's a grass dark type. One of the worst types in a thing. But you look at the stats, that is a good Pokemon, and I think it is a surprisingly bulky Pokemon. But if you remove those weaknesses, right, you just make it a fairy type, a water type, a steel type, you know, maybe not a steel, but a ghost type, you know, or even you make it a psychic type, even because it would help it, you know, with its own weaknesses. Maybe not the bug, but I think it'd be pretty good. I think the best move would be fairy, water, maybe even electric in this matchup. You're not exactly going up against too many ground types, and Ursaluna Blood Moon is, but you're really there for just for the defensive typing of an electric type. You're not really clicking Earthquake against Zarude as a ground type, right? And it's got the bulk to live non-stab Earthquakes and Earth powers. I think Phoenix is going to need a spinner for sure against this team. There's a lot of hazards on the other side, whether it is Hitmontop or Blastoise or both. They both need to come. One of them needs to come as a spinner, but they both do provide like a value outside of removing hazards. Blastoise can eat hits, and even Yawn has a purpose this week, I think. The Intimidate from Hitmontop, very big, and Triple Axle is great coverage in general, but especially against the Pokemon that would like come in on Hitmontop to like, you know, get it out. Good coverage for them too. I'm kind of in between the Enamorus and the Weavile for like, that's the key Pokemon. I think it really just comes down to the amount of support each needs to be like the easiest key to victory for me. I think Enamorus is like just having the basis of the kind of coverage it can have, ground, fire, psychic, all on top of the stab fairy type. Very good, especially like towards mid to late game. I think Enamorus is the key Pokemon here. As far as predictions, this was the hardest one to call so far between the three, but the Infernape I think has the best matchup, but I think like on an individual thing, but I think CJ's team has the better matchup, and I think there's multiple avenues for CJ to take. I'm gonna give this one to Phoenix this week, and I'm gonna say that confidently. I think it maybe wasn't confident in how I said it, but I think I'm gonna be confident saying CJ and the Phoenix Incineroar. I was gonna say the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix Incineroar get the win on their season opener. Now, before we continue, do me a favor. We're about a third of the way through. Hit a like, hit that subscribe, all that stuff. I appreciate it as we build out what we're doing here on the channel, but continuing to build myself as a better, content creator. That's the word I was looking for. So I'll figure it out. Watch by week like 4, I'll have this plug very clean and very nice. Let's get back to the game. So going back to game 4, we have the Cleveland Guardians taking on the South Bend Snowflakes. We're taking on, that is Bop and Pup going up against each other. Let us start with the Cleveland Guardians here. TERA Chi-Yu, man. Who do I need to talk to like get that kind of like just to do that kind of thing, right? The Eggman said that's okay. I mean, it's not fast and it's not exactly physically bulky, but yeah, let's just give this Pokemon that lowers your special defense with a high special attack another stab. Let's just say flying for this matchup, because that sounds reasonable in this matchup. Let's just give it a flying type as well. Crazy. And I look, I don't like the rest of Cleveland's offensive like profile in this matchup though. Like I don't. But Iron Hands would benefit from potential electric terrain that Pup might put up for their own team. So that works in Iron Hand's favor. I don't know. Other than that, like I'm not exactly high on the offensive output outside of Chi-Yu. But I mean, TERA Chi-Yu, right? Who needs more? But Cleveland defensively, Skarm is the glue that is holding the team together. It's going to be tasked with holding Sneasler and Ogerpon Cornerstone, holding them reasonably. And it will also probably have to help with Great Tusk as well. And maybe get a layer of hazards or two just for good measure. It's capable of doing all that stuff, but it's a lot to do. And Rotom does actually have a pretty good thing. Like I know I said Skarmory can help with Great Tusk, but base Rotom is a fantastic matchup against the Great Tusk, right? It's immune to both of its stabs, and you rock a Cobra Parry or just no item, and Knockoff's not doing much, right? It's also immune to Sneasel's fighting type and resist its poison type. I was going to say it's ghost type. It's poison type, outspeeds Moltres Galar if all investments are equal, right? But I don't know. And Levitate, just in general. Like, I think it's pretty good, and it can spread some status, right? Very good. Rotom is very strong here. I think the key, though, is obviously, hey, everybody, just die so that Chi-Yu can come in and claim some lives. I don't think there's going to be much that can resist this Pokemon. And I don't think any other Pokemon has as much value to this matchup as the Chi-Yu does. Taking a look at the South Bend Snowflakes. Offensively, Cleveland doesn't really have a lot of weaknesses to exploit. I don't think it's a really good matchup either for South Bend. But if Sneasler is coming, it's very strong here, right? It stabs, let it hit everything but Rotom for neutral damage. And the team around it helps it match up elsewhere and like kind of find some weak points. I think Ogerpon does have kind of one up the Sneasler with its stab hitting everything for at least neutral damage. And its speed is nice. It's obviously not as great, especially after Unburden, but it can get a Trailblaze up and be even better. So not exactly, it's not horrible, but not exactly impactful, right? Defensively, Great Tusk, really good job of checking the likes of Rotom, if you want to go offensive, Iron Hands as well, and clearing hazards that Glamora, Skarmory, or Swampert are going to want to put up. Great Tusk, big value defensively, and obviously it can still contribute offensively. I think Moltres, though, I think Moltres, you have to bring Moltres because it can... It's really one of the few things on this team that can deal with the Chi-Yu, depending on the Terra type. It's got 125 special defense, it's got a good bulk, and it's resisted by, or resist the dark type at least. So you put an Assault Vest on this Pokemon, and you just kind of chip away. Especially if it tears out of its dark type, you can hit it for the Fiery Wrath and maybe get a beneficial, some chip there. It'll be very good. With the winning Pokemon, the key Pokemon, whatever you want. I in my notes I say Winmon, like Wincon, but Winmon. I do think that Iron Moth being a Terra captain, it doesn't really factor into this at all. Like I just don't think it's a good matchup at all for Iron Moth. I don't even know if I would bring it. I think that's crazy to. I shouldn't say I think it's crazy. I know it's crazy to say. I just don't think it is. I don't think it does what you would want it to do in this matchup, other than maybe punish Skarmory, but it's tough. It's tough, I know. But I do think Ogerpon is probably the key Pokemon. It has a better ability as a breaker because it can come in, hit something, get out without like wasting an Unburden, which is good. And I think if you want Sneasler to clean up late like it could, you got to get it. You got to get some things chipped, and Ogerpon hits almost everything for neutral damage with its stab, so it's very key. Prediction wise, this one was tough. Like I said, I don't like either team like offensively. Like it was tough for me to go, hey, that is, and maybe like I say I don't like it because it's not easy, right? You got to do some digging. You got to figure it out. You got to deal with, if you're taking on Bob, you got to figure out, hey, that Chi-Yu, what do I do with it? Right? If you're taking on South Bend, you're like, all right, you got electric terrain with an Iron Moth, a Terra Iron Moth, Ogerpon, and a Sneasler. Crap. But I don't even think we see Sneasler popping a electric seed. I don't even think we see Pincurkin because I think you need more like contributing members. Will say that I think I'd be more comfortable like looking at this if you told me. I think Pup is the team that's going to win, right? And I'm more comfortable that because Pup has the Pogworm, and I'm never going to vote. I might vote against Pogworm, but not this week. I'm not starting it off. I'm not starting off a vote against Pogworm. Almost halfway through this week's slate of games, we got Game 5. We've got Crep and Tone taking on each other. We've got the Twi-Night Slashers taking on the Miami Palins. We're going to start with Twi-Night here. Offensively, I love the good special attacking team. I just like a good special attacking Pokemon. Volcanion is one of my faves, but Crep has put together quite the team. Hisui and Zoroark leading the team in base special attack is especially strong into Tone's team. As really Overquill is the only reliable ghost resist on the team. Salamence is also a very strong Terra captain. I think it's overlooked because obviously there's a lot of fancier ones, but it could do serious damage in this matchup thanks to its ability to Terra. Ground, flying, and even fire could all be viable offensive types. Let's hit some steel types and just good coverage overall. Defensively, Weezing is normally a Pokemon I overlook, regular Weezing, just the base poison type. It's the type of Pokemon, though, that can be a little bit too passive, that's why. But in this matchup, with the amount of physical attackers, I think it is a very vital part of the team. It can get a Will-O-Wisp, but more importantly, it can just tank some hits. And then similarly, outside of Hisui and Lilligant, there's little that scares Melodic, really. It's really just Hisui and Lilligant, and everything else will struggle, should struggle, I shouldn't say will, but should struggle against a Melodic. So that's something Tone has to consider in building, but for Crep, this is a solid matchup for the Melodic on a defensive front. I didn't really mention it in the offensive portion, though, but I do like Blaziken in this matchup. I'm just not the biggest believer in Blaziken, but with Salamence being able to break through as well as Hisui and Zoroark, I think the key is going to be Blaziken getting able to in there to clean up some weakened opponents, as well as probably get set up, whether it's a mix attack or just straight up like physical or special. Taking a look at Miami here, Tone has Tone's my guy. I like the creativity, but especially with the team, there's nothing more creative though than getting Hisui and Lilligant as your Terra captain. With an open Terra format, it can really prove, like, it can prove its worth, because it's not worried about like being weak to so many things. A lot of teams naturally have grass resist because you get a steel resist, you get a you get a poison for a fairy, all these things, right? They all can take on grass types, but you take a grass type with good coverage, with a stab fighting, and obviously Victory Dance is one of the best setup moves in the game. Really good stuff. And of course there's Palafin. I don't know what else I need to say. It's just, there's I think there's enough of scenarios for Tone to bring in Palafin mid game so it's not a predictable lead. I think leading Palafin is great. I think it's predictable, and you give up a little bit too much of ground in the early game. Defensively, I mentioned it talking about Twilight, but Overquill I think is a must this week. It's got hazards, which are huge, which can definitely help with the Zoroark if it's not wearing boots, or you just status it, and then like that's him. He's been tagged, as well as having Intimidate too. That's another bonus to deal with the Salamence. I think its value goes beyond just resisting the ghost type of Zoroark. And similarly, Garchomp's defensive profile is pretty good thanks to its hazard support. I think you add in its overall power, and Garchomp should be more than just a defensive Pokemon, but I think that's where you start building the set for Garchomp this week. And I'm sure I'll say it plenty, Palafin late game, so forgive me if I don't say it right now, but I'm going to point out that Gardevoir is a strong candidate for a Winmon, as only Iron Crown it can really get in front of it. I know it doesn't have the greatest power, but you put a specs on it, and it can be very dangerous. Calm mindsets as well. Ultimately, though, I'm going to say game one, Tone's going to go crazy with Hisui and Lilligant out of the gate and build around that as the win Pokemon. So I'm going to say, just to be right, that Hisui and Lilligant's the win Pokemon. Prediction-wise, Tone's my guy, and I think this is the first time I've actually watched Crep like in detail. I've seen some stuff, so I'm excited to watch this battle. I think that both teams have an odd matchup, I think, compared to what they want to do. So it'll be a little bit feeling out early on. I think Zoroark is very, very good though in this matchup, and Tone is going to have to spend some resources to handle it. Maybe too much in the long run. Again, he's got Palafin, and while I do believe in Tone Hendry, I think Twilight Slashers and Crep get the dub here. Starting game 6, we have A12 taking on Mmuffinz. So that's Arkham Delibirds taking on the Mmuffinz Mudkips. Starting with Arkham here, I'm a big fan of Iron Valiant in concept. I think it's a little bit tougher sometimes to get it going, but a fast mix attacker who can actually hit hard is great. In this matchup, that's, I think, exactly what it needs to be. It's faster than almost all of Mmuffinz roster. Neutral damage against everything with its stabs. And only I think Salazzle and Delphox resist it. And did you know Iron Valiant learns liquidation? I did when I was looking up. So those are handled. Mmuffinz does have a hard team, though, outside of that for A12 to really deal with. It's really strength on strength. Staraptor can show up and leave early in the matchup, just tossing out double edges and brave birds and just with recklessness. I think that'd be pretty decent for it. And I'm not going to doubt A12. But I'm not a big fan of this team's defensive profile. It's odd. It's constructed unusually. That said, I do like TERA Hydrapple. It is a fun Pokemon to think about building, especially defensively. It's got the Regenerator ability. You can turn it into a stronger attacking Alola-Molo, kind of, with turning into a water type, or stronger, I guess, like Slowbro, or Galarian Slowbro, or I guess those are dual typing, though. What else? It's solid. It's a very solid Pokemon. You remove the not great typing of Grass Dragon, and I think you got something. Jolteon, as well, defensively. Not great offensively, but it does help defensively in a huge way, especially against the Kilowattrel. It's going to get neutral coverage against everything. It also gets Alluring Voice, though, against the Crocodile. So it can't. You can punish it if you think it's coming in. The Winmon here, I think it's just tough from where I'm sitting, and I think this is the worst matchup that A12 is going to have right out of the gate, especially. But it's good if A12 plays to the strengths of this team. The regeneration core of Galarian Slowking and Hydrapple really help take away hits for Iron Valiant to just come in. So I think Iron Valiant's the key to winning, but just needs a little bit of support to get away with what it wants to do. Taking a look at Mmuffinz' team, TERA Annihilate. What do I need to say more than that? TERA Annihilate that can TERA into any type, no restrictions, any type that Mmuffinz can think of. Annihilate. I don't have analysis for it. It's just I can't get the Chi-Yu thing was one thing, but Annihilate is a whole nother thing. I'll give you an actual analysis of the offense though. Delphox does look good. Bronzong's the only psychic resist, and it's weak to fire unless it's running Heat Proof, and if it's running Heat Proof, it's not running Levitate, which is great for everything else. And then it gets coverage in Dazzling Gleam, which can hit Hydrapple before TERA, and if it TERAs into, say, a Steel type, or Steel type, it becomes weak to the Fire type. Defensively for Mmuffinz, Diancie, I think you could, if you were if you looked at A12's team and you're like, hey, what's the perfect Pokemon to stop all of this stuff? It's Diancie. But it's gonna have to tank a couple of hits for its teammates, but it can stand up to Iron Valiant pretty well, as well as prevent Staraptor from getting too crazy. Scizor is an interesting Pokemon in this matchup, I think. I know we often think of it as an offensive Pokemon, especially with Technician Bullet Punch and just U-turn, all that stuff, but it's defensively, it's there. It's got one weakness in Fire type, and there isn't a natural Fire type on the other team for it to be worried about, right? It's got solid defense. I think it's 100 base defense. That's good. It can stand up to Iron Valiant with its stab against at least the Fairy type, and threaten it back with a Bullet Punch, right? So it's pretty solid. I mean, what better option do you have than Scizor, I think? At least to threaten the Iron Valiant. The wind Pokemon, it's boring, it's lame, I know. I'm going to try not to do this week in and week out, but picking the right TERA for Annihilate is how you just win. That's it. TERA pick the right TERA, let it Scarf or Banded or, set up. 80% of this game comes down to the right TERA for Annihilate, and the other 20 is just putting in the right position for Mmuffinz. That said, it's so good, and I don't know, I'm thinking, A12 has Ursaluna as my favorite fat bear, sitting on the couch in his underwear, drinking a beer. That's my favorite guy. But like the thing is, like Mmuffinz' team is so good in this matchup. Annihilate is so good, and Latios. I didn't even mention it has. There's a Latios on the other side. This is my most confident pick. I'm gonna make it. Simply on the matchup on the roster, A12 is an incredible battler. A12 has my number, like not my like phone number, but like my number when it comes to competitive. I'm sure that like A12 will make this a much closer game than the matchups look on paper. But I'm picking it basically because there's a TERA Annihilate with a Latios, and Delphox looks pretty good as well. And there's a Scizor and Diancie. It's all, yeah, I'm picking Mmuffinz. Before we get into the last third of the schedule, if you so choose, I do have a Patreon. For as low as $1, you can support me financially if you so choose. Patreon.com/Grum. Get some early uploads. You get some looks at the graphic work that I'm doing, as well as any other projects I work on, whether it's Pokemon related, wrestling related, any of that. You can get early access to it. That is support.grum.tv or patreon.com/Grum. The link is in the description below. Starting off the final third here with Mario B and Tony. They rhyme, but can they do the time? I don't know what that means. The Monte Bello Mexica taking on the Austin Verdeerling FC. I believe it's off the Verdeerling FC, correct? I think I have it wrong. It is Austin FC Verdeerling. Offensively, Montebello, I love the interesting TERA, right? Picking Excalibur doesn't exactly like jump out to you, right? But I think it's a cool move. And in this matchup, we get to see how creative this Pokemon you can get. Especially as Tony's team is weak to ground except for Landorus and Mesprit, but you can work around that. It opens up the TERA for a lot. An Ice TERA, a Dark TERA, or just go for a defensive with like a Flying TERA or a Water TERA. The counterpart to Urshifu Rapid Strike is Urshifu Single Strike, and it is a scary Pokemon. Even in a matchup where it struggles to find like openings with the amount of Dark and Fighting Resist that Tony has, I think there's a struggle to build with it this week, but it's too good. It's too good to be like, oh yeah, no, it's okay. Dark type is probably the better. Wicked Blow is a great move, and especially if the King Gambit for Austin's side of things, TERA's out of the Dark type, it looks great. Defensively, I love Sinistcha. The little guy is just a tough Pokemon to deal with, and it complements this team very well as its Grass Ghost type helps the team's overall water and ground weaknesses, as well as like the fighting weakness for Urshifu, Tyranitar, and Excadrill. I do have a question. Where do you rank? Let me know in the comments below. Where do you rank Zapdos among Gen 1 Pokemon in this generation? Because I think it's year 26. Hashtag year 26, hashtag 0 Dark 30, hashtag 20. It's still cooking. With the amount of physical attackers on Austin's side, though, this is going to be some clutch statics needed. Will go a long way to help Mario's squad. And the Winmon, I think it's going to be a sand team this week. I think breaking through with Magmortar, whose fire typing is very good here, will let Excadrill come in and just be I think you build around Excalibur this week, whether it's, I say Excalibur, it's just Excadrill. I throw the L there for some reason, but it's just Excadrill. It comes up, whether it's Sand Force or Sand Rush, good stuff there. For Austin's side of things, or Tony's side of things, on the Austin roster, there's harder. I don't know. I talked about Chi-Yu, talked about Tornadus, talked about Annihilate. I don't think there's a more offensive Pokemon than TERA King Gambit. And in a matchup with a potential Sinistcha, Strength Sap, I think Steamrolling is in the cards for King Gambit. I expect TERA Water for longevity purposes, maybe TERA Ghost. Although that gets a little risky with the Urshifu, but I think longevity purposes will let King Gambit do some nasty stuff here. And while the good pal General Tar Heel would say otherwise, Frostlass is about as reliable of an ice type as there is, and with only Magmortar being the only ice resist, I think Frostlass could get away with running Specs Ice Beam, thanks to like the only thing I think that outspeeds it on the other side of it is the Azelf. So pretty solid. Like, I think pretty solid there. Defensively, it's normally offensive, mind you. But Gouging Fire, I think, can stand up to the Magmortar without a second thought. I think it does get Scorching Sands. I don't recall if it gets Earth Power, but I know it gets Scorching Sands. But it can also just spread valuable burns with Burning Bulwark and still have some offensive potential. But I think defensively is where Gouging Fire benefits this week. And Landorus 2 is another great Pokemon defensively this week. It's got some value offensively too, like the Gouging Fire, but Rocks, Intimidate, Momentum, Strong Earthquakes, I think gives Landorus prime spot on the team. I don't think there's any question about it. I think it's a tough matchup for Tony, but with the help of some bulkier defensive hit takers like Landorus, Gouging Fire, I think King Gambit will have enough to break through, but I think it starts with Landorus in the early game. If the Landorus can get Rock set up, can get some good chip early, and can last until like the mid to end game, I think that's going to be a win for Tony. It is the first team that stand out to me though, because this is a team that has a lot of bulk, but not sacrificing offense too much. A lot of teams, you get some bulky Pokemon who can't do much offense, or bulkier teams, I should say. And sure, Austin is lacking in the special attack department. I mean, I went over it. The Frostlass is your special attacker. But I think against the physical team that Montebello has, or physical frail team, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my notes wrong. I don't think you need the special attacks too much, but Mario's team is just as strong. Threatens Austin in a big way. So it's going to go back and forth. I think this is like, if you're thinking about it, it's a slobber knocker. They're hitting each other hard, hitting each other fast. I'm going to go with Montebello in a close one. I just think that Excadrill is just a bit too good this week. But we'll see. I'm excited to see it. Maybe that might be it. Maybe I'm just excited to see a TERA Excadrill perform. Also, Tyranitar, T-Tars. Game number 8, it is TJP taking on who? We got the Bundle Montreal taking on the Manshine City Necrozmas. I have held for a long time that Iron Bundle is a fraud of a Pokemon. In Draft League. In Draft League. I think it's too reliant on hitting Hydro Pumps for, for stab. And even doing that, it's not hitting them as hard as you would like it to. But I think that might not be the case this week. There is some really good damage to be done as an Ice type without really needing the Hydro Pump. There's also an Iron Boulder on TJP's side of things. So you got the other Paradox to pair with it. It's faster than everything but the Darkrai for who. Boulders, stabs might not be the best Psychic Rock, but it can Terra. So it can become a ground type or a fairy type and turn those into a nightmare for who. Defensively, we got to talk about this. You're going to look at that. You're going to see, I don't know, I think it might be over here, it might be over there. There is a round 2 Alomola. That is not a drafted something round 2, then dropped it. No. Round 2 Alomola. TJP, you picked this fat slob of a Pokemon round 2. It was bad enough to draft Bundle round 1, but this fat, out of shape, waste of game design, you picked it too. Sure, it matches up well with this matchup thanks to its bulk as well as its wish. Yeah. And that's all I'm going to say about it positively. Okay? It's a fat slob, and I hate it. Not the same though with Pheasantipity. I like it. I also think it's a must bring because between Quaquaval's fighting type and Darkrai's really just threatening presence, having that bulk and that typing, very good, very strong. Also, it can take, absorb some potential toxic spikes, which are huge. I think win value-wise, if you're looking at picking which Pokemon to build the game around, I actually wouldn't look exactly at Boulder or Bundle. I think Dragonite as a potential win mon is pretty solid there. Once Tinkaton is gone, there's not much that really wants to take an outrage from a boosted Dragonite, and there are plenty of ways to deal with the Tinkaton. The reigning BBR Summer Scramble champion, who I like what I've seen. Who's interesting. We'll get to it in a second because Darkrai is going to eat in this matchup. However you wanted to serve, with some green beans or some rice or some just a chocolate fondue, either way, it doesn't matter. This Pokemon, there's one Dark Resist, just the Fezandipity, and Hisui and Goodra can stand in front, but that's really about it. This might be the best matchup Darkrai has all season, and I think Who should take advantage of that. TERA Quaquaval is the perfect complement to Darkrai, especially in a matchup like this where even without the TERA, it can threaten the Goodra and get it out of the way. Add in the ability to TERA, and it can be a ground type to hit the Fezandipity strong. The problem is, I have heard this, and I'm sure others have. A bulkier defensive Quaquaval is what I'm hearing, and I don't know how I feel about that, but we'll have to see. Who won the Summer Scramble, so we'll have to see. Because I've also been told that Who is something of a stall merchant. And the draft doesn't feel that way. I look at this draft and I don't see a stall team. So if Who's a stall merchant, I think I almost begrudgingly I hate stall with a passion. Ask anybody in my draft in the DSPL, the Dorkside Pokemon League. I hate it. Literally have installed a stall tax on stall Pokemon so that they are worth more than they probably should be, because this team does not look like that. I do think there's some bulky Pokemon, like Clodsire can help this week with Unaware, with a Water Absorb, but it also can set up some hazards to deal with, to bring it like Avalugg in to take advantage of it, or just get punished, because Avalugg is the only spinner on TJP's team. And speaking of spinners, Who has 3 of them? And a defogger. So there's I like this. I like this team because I like the idea of having multiple hazard removing Pokemon that are flexible, right? I think Terapagos though is a must bring defensively due to Chandelure, as well as Terra Shell being giving it a little bit of extra hits from some strong attackers. But I think Chandelure is a big enough threat that I'd be worried about it. I just think that as good as Dragonite looks for TJP, Quaquaval does, in theory, outpace it at every aqua step of the way, pun intended. The issue for Who is more about getting things in range, and I mean, that's got me kind of saying lean on the Darkrai, but this is, I'm excited. I'm interested in seeing how Who turns this team into a stall team. You Bramble guys, but I'm interested to see it. I'm interested to see it. Prediction wise, I love TJP, but this draft left a lot to be desired. Mainly reliable removal. That's a Pokemon that if you're not wearing boots, you're taking 25% to rocks in the Avalugg, and Who's got a lot of hazards to stack. I think TJP is going to have to sacrifice power for boots, and that might cost him. I think Who gets the win in this matchup, continuing a hot streak as a battler. It's fun to see. It's fun to see. I like creatively building a team against what it should be. I feel like this shouldn't be. I feel like Who's team shouldn't be a stall team, but that is Who's fiber. That is a reputation that Who has. Game number 9, the last game, closing things out with Shadow Gallade taking on JarlTheKing. We got the Carolina Tauros Heels taking on the Hamilton Toro Cats. Carolina, I'm just going to preface this. I don't like this matchup for Shadow Gallade. I don't. But Kyurem stands out offensively. It's a nice type that is stronger here. And the 2 steel types in Cobalion and Heatran, neither one of them want to deal with special attacks often. I think that helps out Kyurem. Maybe a mix attacker so that you don't get walled by this bulk of Florges and Meloetta, but I think you can also ask for Galarian Zapdos to help with those 2. Mainly, it doesn't hit everything for super effective with its stabs, but it can hit everything but the Thundurus for neutral damage. Especially the Florges and the Meloetta, so it makes it a pretty good wall-breaking option. I like Galarian Zapdos. It's one of those Pokemon that I've bookmarked as I want to try this Pokemon my next draft. I like it. Defensively, this matchup is worse than the offensive prospects for Shadow Gallade. Even though the glaring weak spots of Water and Ice aren't immediately exploitable, there's several weak spots, especially against the special defense. It has to deal with 60% of Hamilton's roster having a special attack of over 100 or more. That is putting a lot on Ogerpon Wellspring to answer. Thankfully, it can TERA, which means it gets its special defense boosted every time it's out there. But that's still a lot to ask for one Pokemon to deal with. Sandy Shocks, normally offensive minded. I think this week, though, with its typing, it can stop Thunderous's stabs and can revenge the Heat Train and Hisui and Samurott. So those are very big. For Carolina, I think the Pokemon you build around to win is Kyurem. As good as Gyarados and Sandy Shocks are, Kyurem, I think, is the one you want to build for and build around. Hamilton, we're going to get to, finally, Jarl, we got you, don't worry about it. But Heatran looks very, very good. It only is resisted by, its fire type is only resisted by the Incineroar, so the Incineroar doesn't want to take an Earth Power, which means you could just run those two moves and hit everything. But you can also run a Flash Cannon for just good coverage as well. I think you do have to worry about a Dugtrio being like an Arena Trap set, Revenge set, but there's ways to work around the Air Balloon, Shuckaberry, Indoor Custap type stuff. Ogerpon for Ogerpon, ban for ban. Jarl's got the better one this week. Even though the grass typing isn't strong this week, getting the speed boost and allowing it to ignore any Scarfers other than the other than a Dugtrio, a Scarf Dugtrio, which doesn't like that, probably is not going to be there. I just think getting the speed boost is very huge, gets it out of bad matchups, and really threatens the Ogerpon Wellspring just immediately. Defensively, I talked about Florges being very good here. It is very good. The special defense and special attacking isn't quite there for Shadow, so Florges can invest a little bit more defensively and still be a good special wall. I think Quillfish can help in that regard on the physical side with Intimidate, but also the hazards it can stack. Spikes, Toxic Spikes. Ogerpon Wellspring can't wear heavy-duty boots. It has to have the mask, therefore it's going to take damage anytime it comes in on hazards. The more hazards you can get up, the Toxic Spikes, the better, to help break down that special wall. And really, I think Heatran is the Pokemon you build around. I think that's the win mon. Whether it's breaking or just closing out, I don't think there's a better Pokemon for this matchup, for Jarl. Prediction-wise, I don't really like the matchup for Shadow Gallade, and I'm not saying that there's not avenues for victory. I just don't think there are ways to get to those avenues without sacrificing too much, and then that closes them off. I just think Jarl has too much bulk. I think Jarl has the ability to take advantage of a lower special defense for the team that Shadow has, and I think the better Ogerpon is kind of huge this week. I think Shadow can cook up some stuff. Again, Sandy Shocks is pretty solid, Kyurem's pretty solid, but I think there's just enough to deal with those Pokemon and consistently. And not like, oh, they can take one and then position. No, I think like Florges can come in, deal with them, recover off with a wish. Overall, I just think Jarl has a better team this week in this matchup, and I'm going to go that way for Jarl getting the victory. And that will do it for our week 1 preview. If you liked what you saw, leave a like, leave a subscribe. I hope you enjoyed my analysis. I hope I made you think a little bit about some of the matchups, and we'll see. Maybe if you're watching this on the playlist that this is a part of, you can go watch these games in the order. Go watch them. Go watch them, and I'll see y'all next week. There might be a watch along for week 1 on Sundays, on Sunday night this week and every week going forward. I will see y'all. I am Grum, and if no one has said it to you today, allow me to be the first one to say it to you. I love you. Peace.